You think you've heard every Meghan Markle story there is, but what if I told you this one changes everything? Because just when the world thought her Paris Fashion Week debut was her grand return to the spotlight, a shocking interview dropped, and what it revealed about who really paid for that trip turned her whole fairy tale upside down. We're not talking rumors, we're talking receipts, regret, and a royal fury so loud it nearly blew the crown clean off. Paris was supposed to be her big moment. Her comeback, the one where the world sees her not as the Duchess who left the palace, but the queen of Hollywood chic. But behind that $1 million smile, the story wasn't adding up, because sources close to Balenciaga started whispering something different. There was no invitation. None. Meghan Markle didn't get called. She called them. Word on the street says she'd been messaging the brand's creative director, Demna Gvasalia, for years. Harmless at first, friendly texts, compliments about his work, little "can't wait to collaborate someday" hints. But then just before Fashion Week, she allegedly made her move. "I'll be in Paris. Would love to stop by the show." Sounds innocent, right? Except that stop by turned into her walking the red carpet like an official guest. Balenciaga's team was stunned. Their event planners scrambled to make space for her. Photographers were tipped off. And suddenly, Meghan Markle, the self-made Duchess, was in Paris at her own request. No invitation, no contract, no payment from the brand. Just pure Meghan showing up, cameras ready, image in hand. And if that sounds familiar, oh guys, that's because it is. Now, showing up uninvited is bold, but flying halfway across the world for it, that's expensive. Here's where things get messy. Because while Meghan's team wanted everyone to think she funded the trip herself, sources claim otherwise. Behind the scenes, insiders alleged that the Archwell Foundation and even Invictus Games funds were quietly tapped to cover the costs. That's right, charity money. Money meant for veterans, community work, and outreach, allegedly used to pay for first-class tickets, luxury suites, and designer prep. And that's what made Prince Harry furious. Word is when he found out how the trip was paid for, he lost it. This wasn't a family vacation or official appearance. It was a self-styled PR mission disguised as philanthropy. Meghan reportedly traveled first class with Marcus Anderson, her longtime friend and fixer, while the rest of her team flew coach. The optics were not great. She arrived in Paris looking like royalty, but behind the scenes it was all smoke and mirrors. Her glam squad was working overtime. The PR handlers were crafting press statements that made it sound like an official partnership. And Meghan, she was selling the fantasy. The story wasn't about attending Fashion Week. It was about owning the narrative, reclaiming status, showing the world that even without the crown, she could still command the spotlight. Except this time, the spotlight wasn't hers to take, and the price tag came with more than anyone expected. Once the photos went viral, the headlines practically wrote themselves. Meghan Markle stuns at Balenciaga, Duchess returns to global fashion, but dig deeper and you'll see how carefully the narrative was spun. Her official statement never actually said she was invited. Instead, it used elegant wordplay. She has long admired his craftsmanship and friendship. See the trick? It sounds like a collaboration, but never claims one. Insiders say that wording was deliberate. Meghan's PR team wanted the prestige without the paper trail. And the mainstream outlets hungry for clicks ran with it, calling her Balenciaga's star guest even though the brand itself stayed quiet. When the truth leaked that she paid her own way, that the designer hadn't invited her, the media went silent. No corrections, no clarifications, just silence. The story had done its job. The image was out. The lie, polished and perfect, was already living online. Behind that silence, one thing was becoming clear. The Meghan Markle brand was no longer about truth. It was about optics. And Paris was her latest illusion. Because this Paris stunt, it wasn't new. Meghan's been playing this game for years. Let's rewind back to her British Vogue moment, the one that turned the fashion world upside down. The headlines then said the same thing. The Duchess of Sussex guest edits Vogue. It sounded so glamorous, so exclusive, until Vogue's own editor, Edward Nineful, spoke up. According to Edward, Meghan invited herself. She had called him under the pretense of charity work, asking him to come to the palace to discuss smart works, a cause she was supporting. But when he arrived, tea poured and smiles exchanged, she dropped the real pitch. What if I guest edited the next issue of Vogue? Now imagine being Edward. You're in Kensington Palace, the Duchess sitting across from you using royal charm and star power. Could he really say no? Of course not. That's how Meghan works. She doesn't wait for doors to open. She knocks them down and walks in like she was already on the guest list. The same thing happened in Paris. Different stage, same script. A self-made invitation wrapped in designer fabric and royal polish. But what worked in London under the palace's shine didn't play out the same way in Paris. Because this time she wasn't the Duchess of a royal household. She was Meghan Markle, solo financing her own fairy tale. And soon the cracks in that fairy tale started to show. Now, let's talk about what really went down behind those velvet curtains. Balenciaga's creative director, Demna Gvasalia, the same one who had been casually texting with Meghan for years, reportedly confirmed something that changed the whole story. He said offhandedly that Meghan invited herself. According to sources close to the brand, Balenciaga wasn't planning to feature her, seat her, or dress her. But when Meghan reached out, the team found themselves in a tight spot. Do you say no to a woman who once wore a royal title? Not exactly. So, they struck a deal. Quiet, simple, and convenient. She could come, but she'd have to pay her own way. No private jet, no styling budget, no brand coverage. And as for her outfit, everything was on loan. That's why, if you look closely at the pictures, the dress didn't fit quite right. The sleeves hung a little long, the waist sat a little high because that gown wasn't hers to keep. And the shoes, sources say she got exactly one pair. One black Balenciaga heel carefully loaned for the event to be returned afterward like a rental car. For someone who once lived inside palaces, it was a sobering detail. The brand that once would have paid her to show up now had her covering her own tab. And when the photos hit social media, Balenciaga's PR reportedly went into panic mode. They hadn't invited her, but now the world thought they had. And with the brand already fighting off its own scandals, being linked to Meghan Markle wasn't part of the plan. They started quietly distancing themselves, correcting details, shifting focus. Behind the scenes, the message was clear. This was Meghan's appearance, not theirs. When Prince Harry found out about the funding, the flight, and the fallout, he reportedly went ballistic. According to sources close to the couple, he was furious that Meghan had tapped into charity funds for what he saw as a vanity project. Archewell was meant to support communities, not bankroll luxury appearances. Invictus, his pride and legacy was sacred to him. To find out money linked to it was used for a fashion show that crossed a line. Insiders claim the argument was ugly. Words like irresponsible, reckless, and embarrassing were thrown around. For a man already battling the press and the palace, this was one scandal too many. And here's the cruel irony. While Meghan was borrowing Balenciaga's security for one night in Paris, Harry was in a legal fight back home for official security protection in the UK. To the outside world, they looked glamorous, rich, and unstoppable. But behind closed doors, that image was falling apart. One argument, one invoice, one photo at a time. This Paris stunt wasn't just another headline. It became the symbol of everything wrong between them. Money, image, and control. Because when the Duchess walked into Paris, she wasn't just chasing fame, she was spending it. And as the glitter began to fade, the woman who once claimed she didn't need the crown was now proving just how much she missed the power it gave her. Paris wasn't just a destination. It was a statement. Long before this trip, Meghan had told friends that Paris was off limits for her and Harry. The city where Princess Diana's life ended was sacred ground, a place too painful for him, too symbolic for her. And yet there she was, in the city of lights, cameras flashing, Balenciaga banners fluttering in the wind. For many, it felt like a power move, a message wrapped in couture, almost like she was saying, I go where I want, when I want. But for Harry, that moment reportedly cut deep. Paris isn't just another city in their love story. It's the ghost of his mother, And the image of his wife smiling for the cameras where his mother's tragedy unfolded, it wasn't strength to him. It was salt in an old wound. Some say it was revenge. Her quiet response to being sidelined at that charity event in Santa Barbara where Harry took the mick and she didn't. Others think it was pure defiance. A woman proving that no royal rule, no past shadow could cage her spotlight. Whatever the truth, that Paris walk wasn't just fashion. It was a message, and everyone in the palace circle heard it loud and clear. Here's where the story folds back on itself. At the end of this whole saga, one detail stands out. The story of Princess Diana walking into a leprosy ward, removing her gloves, and touching the hands of patients no one else would touch. In 5 minutes, she changed how the world saw an entire illness, using her fame to lift others. Now, decades later, another woman walked into Paris, not to comfort but to be seen. It's not about who's better or worse. It's about intention. One used her access to heal, the other to be photographed. And maybe that's what makes this story so haunting. Because Paris, the same city that took Diana, became the stage where her son's wife tried to resurrect her own relevance. And yet, for all the criticism, Meghan's story isn't over. She's still out there rebuilding, rebranding, reaching for the next spotlight. But this time, the audience is watching differently. The crown she wanted doesn't glitter anymore, and the question lingers in the air like perfume. When the cameras fade, who is she really without them? So maybe that's the legacy of Paris. Not a comeback, not a triumph, but a mirror. A mirror reflecting two women, two legacies, and one haunting truth. You can borrow the dress, you can buy the ticket, you can even pose for the cameras. But legacy isn't something you can loan.